Alright, so welcome back everybody. So for this video, I'm going to show you guys how to play Everdell with the Mistwood expansion. Now before we start talking about the special mode of playing with Mistwood, if you're playing a two-player game or solo game, I'm going to talk about the modules that they have in this expansion that you don't need to play, that you can play with even if you're playing a 3-player game, a 4-player game, 5 or 6-player game for that matter. So let's talk about those modules that this expansion adds to the game first. So the first module that we have here is the farms module. So you can take out the old farms and place in the new farms in its place. So you have new variation with farms. So you can add these to the game instead, which is really cool. This farm is just like a regular farm, but it doesn't take up any space in your city. So yeah, there's some variations here with all the different farms. Some even cost more resources as well. So make note of that. Some are cheaper, but this one might be cheaper, but it's just gaining a berry. So in the end, there's a lot of different variety of farms here. And so you just take out the old farms and put these new farms in. So remember, this comes with Mistwood. So if you want these special farms, you're going to need the Mistwood expansion, obviously, since this is in the Mistwood box. But yeah, this is a module you can play even if you're playing a 3 or more player game, or 4 or more players than that. So one of the modules that it adds. Fun little module for sure. Okay, another module you can play with in the game is you can also add these Corn cards, you know, Corn Evertell's Field and Corn Evertell the Keen. You can add all 5 of these special critter and construction cards that are considered unique. They're all considered unique. You can add them to the game as well. You'll shuffle these 5 cards into the main deck of cards, just like you would with the farms. So that's another module that Mistwood adds that you can play with a 4-player game or a 3-player game or 5 or 6. So just another module that is enjoyable and fun to play with, but you're going to need to get Mistwood to play with this module. So that's 2 modules. Now let's talk about this module. This module, you'll notice, has the legendary construction cards and the legendary critter cards as well. This is a little bit different with these 10 cards, 5 construction and 5 critter cards. It's a little different. Instead of shuffling these into the deck, what you're going to do is you're going to separate these 5 cards into 2 different decks. And then you will shuffle them each, and you will hand 1 construction and 1 critter card to each player. Meaning you can't play with this if you're playing with 6 people because there's only 5 of each. But in normal way, you would be playing with 3 or 4 players. So in a 3 or 4 player game, only at most 4 construction cards and 4 critter cards will be played with. Now, what's so special about these cards is you get to start with them basically in your hand. But because these are so special, these legendary construction and legendary critter cards are so special, they do not take up space in your hand, nor do they count. Nor do they count as like being technically part of your hand either. So they don't, add another card to your hand limit or increase your hand limit or something like that. But they do make it so you can still have 8 other cards, not including these 2 cards here, whatever construction and critter you happen to, end up getting. Now, the rest of the cards, so there will be probably at least 1 more construction and probably 1 more critter left. They will be returned to the box. So nobody else gets these extra cards. So you're only going to play with some of these in a game, and you're not sure which ones you're going to get. Now, what's really cool about these construction and critter cards, another interesting thing, is they actually will replace a card that you have in your city. So, for instance, if you have the castle in your city already, you can discard the castle from your city to play the Strong Root Castle for free, okay? Or you can pay all of those resources, 4 twigs, 4 resin, and 4 pebbles to play it into your city instead. So you can do that. If you don't have the castle, you can play those you can spend those resources to play it. Or you can hopefully get yourself a castle and play it for free. So that's another cool thing. Of course, you'll discard the other castle and this will take its place. Another cool thing is if you have a legendary card in your city, whether you got to play it for free or paid the resources, it also does not count towards your city limit. So it does not take up space in your city either. So that's another cool thing about this unique module that they add, that you can play these cards for free. That's awesome, and they don't take up space. That's even better, right? And so this one will replace the clock tower if you have the clock tower, for instance. This one will replace the dungeon if you have it, and you get to play for free, obviously. This one replaces the general store, and you get to play for free if you have the general store, obviously. This one replaces the cemetery, so you discard the cemetery, obviously. And the same thing with these critters. So if you have a shopkeeper in your town, you can play this for free by discarding the shopkeeper. By discarding the ranger, you can play this for free. By discarding the gatherer, you can play this one for free. By discarding the chip sweep, you can play this one for free. And by discarding the bard, you can play this one for free. So that's really cool that you can play these for free if you have the card already in your town. And remember, you start with 1 construction and 1 critter. So who knows what you'll end up getting into your city. Maybe you'll be lucky and it'll be one of the first cards you can play into your city. Or maybe you just won't find it. So then maybe you'll be having to spend those resources if you really want it in your city. But remember, it doesn't take up space, so it's totally worth it, especially since, man, look how many victory points you could potentially get, especially with that one, right? So that's another awesome module to the adds that Mistwood expansion adds to the game. This was definitely probably the best of the 3 modules that Mistwood adds for sure. So you definitely want to get Mistwood expansion, even if you're not interested in the 2-player mode or the solo mode. So this is definitely worth it for these cards alone, but also for the other 2 modules in the game as well. Okay, so now let's start talking about actually how to play with Mistwood. How do we play with this expansion? Well, Mistwood, or Mistweave, which is the giant spider over there, it acts as an additional player. She's like an AI player. Now, she's still very similar to Rugwort. Rugwort, he didn't collect resources, and so does she. She does not collect resources either, okay? She won't collect resources. She will place out workers, though. She will place out workers at certain locations, blocking you from going to those locations, and she'll do a variety of other things. What she does is based on this deck of cards here, okay, on her turn. And if you're playing solo mode, she gets to go first. So if you're playing solo, you don't even get to go first. She does. So watch out. Now, these cards here will get added to this deck as you get into a new season, okay? So let's talk about these cards here, these activity cards, because that's how she does her turn, okay? And let me see if I can bring up there we go. Hopefully we can see most of that in the camera. And we'll move these a little closer so we can see the forest locations. Okay, that should work. Okay, so what you're going to do on her turn, when it's her turn, and so she's going first anyways, is you're going to basically reveal one of these cards. Now, in the setup, you're actually going to go through these cards, and you're going to separate the cards that have just the little spiders on it from the rest of the cards, because you'll notice this one has her on it, this one has her worker on it, this one doesn't have anything, okay? So you're going to go through these cards, and they're known as the winter activity cards because they all have the winter symbol on them, so they're known as the winter activity cards, okay? And so you'll take out the 5 and then randomly take one of them and make it so that way her workers are going to go first, basically. So these 2 cards and these 2 cards and this one are the 5. So you're going to take one of these 5, shuffle it, and then you're going to take one to be basically randomly be the first card for her first turn. Then you'll shuffle the other 4 cards into with these cards, and then, so we'll just shuffle these real quick. Okay? Just kind of shuffle them a little bit. Okay. Now they're shuffled. So this would be her first action, whatever it may be, right? Okay, so what she's going to do is she's going to send out this worker to a forest location. It shows you on the board which forest location it would be. It would be this one right here that I'm pointing to. And so she would place a worker at that location, blocking you from going there. So that's what she would do on her turn. That would be all she would do on her turn. So that's 1 turn for her, okay? That is 1 turn for her. And then it would be your turn. You would do whatever you're going to do. And then she would take her next turn. So let's draw the next card. The next card is blank, but it has this symbol here. What this symbol means is what she's going to do is you're going to have to roll this dice. Okay, so we'll roll it. And it's an 8. So then she's going to take this card here, the 8, this diplomat, and she gets to play it into her city. Okay, so let's say this is her lair, this is her city right here. She can only have 15 cards in her city, just like you. So that's another thing. She has a city limit, 15 cards. She can't have more than 15, just like us, okay? Just so you know that. So, but that's her first card in her city. And she's going to score the same amount of points that we would for the card. So if it's 2 points for us, then it's 2 points for her, okay? So she would get 2 points for that card at the end of the game because she played it into her city. Another thing I forgot to mention is she does have a hand of cards. She starts with 1 card in her hand at the beginning of the game. And if you're playing with 2 players, then she starts with 2 cards in her hand. So I'm going to go ahead and place her hand here. These are just basically to help you remind you what she does with her actions and stuff like that, and turn summary and prepare for season and all that. So that's what these boards are mostly for. And then you set them up like this, so she has like a layer, if you will. Okay? So that's what she would do. And then this action also does another thing. When she takes this particular action here, not only do you replenish the meadow with a card, but you'll also add 1 card to her hand and shuffle it into her hand. Right now, there's no point since she's only got 1 other card anyways. But yeah, she would get another card for her hand. There will be times when she'll actually get to play a card from her hand into her city, and that's why she has a hand, so she can play a card from her hand into her city. But most likely, she'll be playing mostly cards from the meadow into her city, okay? So that's another action that she took. Now, whenever there's a possibility of an action she can't take for whatever reason, that's why this slash is here. If she can't take this action for whatever reason it is, especially if it's a different action, and then she gets to take this action instead. If for some reason she can't take this action either, then there's a default action that she can do, which is this here. And this one would just allow her to draw 1 more card if she was to take the default action. So there's 3 possibilities. Sometimes when she places out a worker, I might have a worker out at that spot that she's supposed to play it at. If that's the case, then it would be the next one down and so on. That's usually how that would work. So that would be 1 turn for her. Then I would take my turn like normal. Then she would go again. And so then we draw the next one. Okay, so the next one is her this time. This time she places herself into the meadow. It's the same symbol as the last time, but it's also got this symbol next to it and her. So now you're placing her into the meadow. So we're going to roll the dice, and it's a 5. So she is going to go here. She's going to take the general store and play it into her town, into her city, okay? Now she stays here for the rest of the season, okay? Now, she might be in a different season than you. She might start out in winter just like you do, but she might get to spring before you, or you might get to spring before her. So just like a normal player, if you were playing against another player, sometimes they'll be in a different season than you. But she will stay here. And the reason why she's staying here is not only does it, obviously now you have less cards to play from the meadow because there's only 7 now because she sits here. But these little web tokens will now go into every place that surrounds her. And that includes cards that are diagonal too. Now these web tokens, what they signify is based on what card you drew from the, let's see, what is it? It's based on what card you drew from this deck. So there are 3 cards in this game, 3 modules you can play with in this game, but personality is something you're going to play with, okay? And so these are the plot cards. So you'll probably be playing with these to make it more interesting. These are the plan cards, and these are the personality cards. So if you're playing with the personality cards, you'll only play with one of these personality cards. You can choose which one you would like to play with. You don't have to like randomly select one if you don't want to. They're all nasty. And so let's say we were playing with Nightweave the Noteworthy. Well, it says meadow cards adjacent to Nightweave cost 1 extra berry even if played for free, but it may be reduced by a card playing ability. So if you played a card that only costed a couple of resources, you could still decrease that berry cost as well. But what it's saying is the shopkeeper, the gatherer, and the city hall now all cost 1 additional berry because these are all adjacent to her. So now the shopkeeper would be 3 berries, the gatherer would be 3 berries, and the city hall would be 2 twigs, a resin, a pebble, and a berry. Okay? That's how that would work. So it doesn't matter if it's a construction. It would still cost an additional berry thanks to her ability. This is actually probably the tamest of her abilities. There are some pretty nasty personalities in here, including nasty. So, but anyways, it does make it more interesting for sure. So this is something that you'll probably end up playing with as well. So that's what these are for. Just to remind you that if you decide to play a card that is adjacent to her with these tokens on it, you're going to be paying that additional berry. It doesn't affect these cards though. You're safe there. But if she was here, it would be all of these. So only a couple of cards would still be free. So make note of that. Or should I say, make noteworthy of that for sure. So that's another mechanic in the game as well. So yes, so that's what she would do. Now she stays there, like I said, until next season, okay? So then that would be her turn. Her turn would be done. Then you would go and you would take your turn doing whatever you're going to be doing. And then you would draw the next card for her turn. The next card is this. She gets to place a worker at the 3 twigs area. Okay, so then you would place a worker here. And she wouldn't collect the resources from that location, but she would block you from going there, obviously. And that would be her turn. And then once again, it would be your turn to go. And then it would be her turn to go. Okay, now, the next card she drew is the one with the spider on it. So when she is in the meadow, and all her workers have been placed, and she draws a card that either has the spider or her on it, as in Nightweave, then you prepare for next season. Meaning, if you draw a card that doesn't have that, so here's that card here does not have that symbol on it, so you would still take this action here, even if all the workers have been placed and she's been placed too, okay? But otherwise, like I said, if it's these cards or these cards, she is going to be prepared for next season as her action. Now, what's preparing for next season for her? Well, one of the things would be, obviously, she comes back to her little lair. And so does the 2 workers that she placed out. Okay, that's another thing that would happen. But another thing that would happen is if she was preparing for spring, which is next, obviously, she would get the worker that comes with spring, which is this worker here. She'd get 1 worker. Another thing that she would do when preparing for spring is she would get to add 2 cards from the main deck to her hand. and then you would discard one random card from the meadow and replenish the meadow. So basically, you would draw 2 cards from the main deck, like I said. These would go into her hand. So now she's got 4 cards in her hand. Then you would roll this dice, and I just rolled a 3. So this card here would get discarded, okay? So we'll just discard this, okay? We'll just discard it somewhere. And then you would replenish the meadow, okay? So now there's cards back to being 8 cards in the meadow. And you would also take off all of these tokens as well for preparing for next season, okay? That's how that would work. That would be her turn, okay? Now, there's another thing that will happen as well when she's preparing for next season. She will also get one of the events, the Cartographer's Expedition, Harvest Festival, Grand Tour, City Monument. She might get one of them. So if there's an event there, and she does this every season, what's going to happen is it's going to be based on this card here, on these cards here, okay? You'll see this. Then if it's this symbol going in this direction, she's going to take an event from right to left. And she just gets it. She automatically just gets an event when she prepares for next season. So she would get the Cartographers, she'd get that one right there, if that was the case. So that's another thing she's going to get when preparing for next season. So watch out for that. You're going to run out of events really fast if you're not getting those events. And it's dependent on this card here and where this thing in the corner is. And they're different. See, this one is going in the other direction. So it would be left to right if it was this card. And it would be right to left if it was this card, or something like that. So it'd be right to left if it was that card, and if it was the other card, it'd be left to right. So she'd get the City Monument instead if it was left to right. So it's just dependent on which, and all of the cards have that. So she's always going to get one event for that anyways. Okay, now, so that's pretty much it for preparing for season if it was spring. But when she prepares for summer, she gains 2 workers. So when she prepares for summer, she'll get 2 workers. We only get 1 worker, but she gets 2 in summer. Another thing that's going to happen when she prepares for summer is you're going to add 2 random cards from the meadow to her hand, and then you'll replenish the meadow. So 2 cards randomly, when she's preparing for summer, will be taken from the meadow and added to her hand, and then you'll replenish. That's how she'll do that. And then if you're preparing for autumn, she's going to get 3 workers. So she'll get 3 workers when preparing for autumn. We only get 2. So man, she's got 8 workers for autumn. And then another thing that will happen is you'll add 2 cards from the main deck. So she'll get 2 cards from the main deck to her hand. Not from the meadow this time, but from the main deck to her hand. And then you'll discard 2 random cards. So you'll discard 2 random cards from the meadow after that, and then replenish the meadow. So she gets 2 cards from the deck, and then you have to discard 2 cards from the meadow, randomly by rolling the dice. So you'll be doing a lot of dice rolling for sure when you're playing with Nightweave. So make note of that you're going to be doing that quite a bit. So that's just some of what you're going to be doing with her. Obviously, there's still lots of actions she could potentially take. And then, when she prepares for spring, that's another thing. So when she prepares for spring, there are these 2 cards here that don't have the winter symbol on them, but they have the other 3 symbols. You'll add these 2 cards and you'll shuffle them into the deck. So now there's even potentially 2 more powerful cards, activity cards. And then when she prepares for summer, there are 2 more to add, potentially. And when she prepares for autumn, there are 3 more potentially. Now, there are a few more activity cards. If you're playing with certain expansions, you'll actually have a few more of these activity cards in the game. So it may not be always the same number depending on what expansions you're playing with, whether it be Pearlbrook or New Leaf, for instance. So make note of that there's going to be probably more activity cards if you're playing with other expansions as well. So that's basically how her activity cards work. Also, obviously, there's still lots of actions she could potentially take. Like, for instance, she could end up here. Sometimes she'll end up here when she cannot take an action. And her default action will sometimes be to place a worker at this location here. And when that's the case, what's going to happen is you're going to grab this card here, whatever it may be, and she's going to get point tokens based on this number. So if you play her on tame, then she gets no point tokens, but still places the worker there. But if you're playing with, there's a difficulty of 4 up to 4. So it's 0 to 4. If you're playing with difficulty 4 and she goes here, then she gets 4 point tokens. So make note of that. The harder you play, the more point tokens she could potentially get when placing a worker here. But obviously, tame is the easiest. 0. She gets nothing. She just places the worker there. So that's almost like, ooh, a freebie for us, for sure. Let's see, another action she could potentially take. Sometimes she'll be able to place a spider onto an open red destination card that you have. And if she does that, she blocks you from your potential use of your red destination card. But she also still gets you the points. So if she lands on your spot, that's a red destination card that's open. Obviously, that one's not open. But you're going to get the point tokens at least. So that's still at least something. She can also place workers into her city that has red destination cards. So if she has a red destination card in her city, and she ends up placing a worker there, she'll get point tokens for that too. So based on how many an opponent would get if they placed it there, she'd get point tokens. And of course, if you place your worker into her red destination spot, technically you're giving her point tokens still. So make note of that. So she can get point tokens that way as well. There are actions that will allow her to actually place a worker at an event, and she automatically gets it. So that's another way she can get events. It's not just simply at the end of the season, but there are activity cards that will allow her to go to those places and get points. At the end of the game, she'll be able to place workers at the journey locations. So make note of that. 4 or 5 is in here, for instance. There's just so many different actions. I don't think I'll mention every single one, but you get the point. There's a lot of different actions that she can take. Placing workers at resource spots, blocking you from going there, getting to play cards from the meadow and stuff like that. If she is in the meadow, okay, so let's just say she was here and she was in the meadow, okay, and she got that card ability that lets her, let me find it. Let me find the symbol first. Here it is. If she gets this ability here for a turn, and she is in the meadow, and you happen to roll the number that she is on, so if you roll an 8, where's the 8? Here's the 8. So if you roll an 8, and she's on 8, instead of taking what she would be here, because technically there wouldn't be anything here because she's here, what you'll do is you'll actually shuffle her hand, and then play the top card that's in her hand into her city, okay? So that's when her hand is going to be useful, is when she's already in the meadow and she's blocking a spot. So she doesn't even block herself when she rolls a number that she's on. She's still getting a card, potentially a good one, from her hand into her city. So that's why the hand is here for her. And she does not have a hand limit either. So make note of that. Doesn't have a hand limit. What else do I want to mention? There's still a couple other things I want to mention over here for sure. Just trying to think if there's anything else I want to mention. Oh, yes. So sometimes when she takes an action, there's an occasion. Let me find one. It actually happened to me once. Okay. Sometimes she will have all her workers out. She hasn't prepared for spring, let's say. Let's just say she has her workers in different spots. She's got a worker here, and she's got a worker over, oh, sorry about that, guys. She's got a worker there. She's got both of her workers there, and she is not in the meadow as of yet. But you get to a point where you're supposed to place a worker, but you can't because all her workers have been placed. You don't move her workers, you only move them when she's preparing for season. So what happens is she doesn't get that action that turn. because she can't take this action. She can't place the spiderling at the pebble because she doesn't have a worker. She can't place the spiderling at that forest location here because she doesn't have a worker. And then the default is to actually place a worker in Haven, which is here. But she can't do that either because she doesn't have a worker. So when that happens, she just misses her turn, basically. That was her turn. Nothing at all. So make note of that can happen too. You get a freebie. She doesn't, she loses an action. How wonderful for you. Because the only time she can prepare for next season is when she's also in the meadow. She has to be in the meadow. All her workers have to be placed. And then when the spiderling is drawn, or she is drawn, then you prepare for the next season. That's when you do it. It took me like 20 minutes to figure that out on my own when that happened, because it took a while to figure it all that out. So make note of that. That was the one main thing I wanted to make sure I made note of. Now, we talked about these cards here, her personality cards. I only talked about the one, obviously, but there are still 2 other stacks of cards that you'll be playing with probably. These are the plans, and then these are the plots. When you play with the plans, once again, you only play with one of these cards, and you can, randomly pick one, or you can just pick one. And then you'll have this for the entire game. This plan will be in effect the entire game. And so I played with this one. Each time you play a purple prosperity card, Nightweave gains points equal to the point value of that card. So if you ever play a purple prosperity, and this is the card you're playing with, webworking, she's going to get point tokens every time you do that, and the same amount. So make note of that's going to happen. So, ouch. But there's a lot worse ones in here too, obviously. So that's another thing that you can play with. You can play with these plan cards as well, and only one per game. Now, another thing that you can play with, the last module, is the plots. These, you'll shuffle. You'll play with all of these. But honestly, you'll only play with 3 per game. Because when you prepare for the first season, when you prepare for spring, you're going to draw the top card of this, and then you're going to have the effect for the game, for that season. Sometimes it's a one-time thing, and it just needs to be dealt with right then and there. Something that you might even be able to stop from happening by paying resources or discarding cards or something. Other things will affect you for the whole season, and then when she prepares for summer, you would discard this card, and you would draw a new card for summer. And then obviously the same thing for autumn. So you'd only play with 3 of these, and you don't play with the plots when you're in winter. When she's in winter, she doesn't have these plots. It's only when she prepares for spring that you're going to have to start worrying about them. But what's something that could potentially be a problem? Well, this is political influence. This is going to affect you the entire season, and it affected me in the entire season of spring. Each time you want to play or activate a blue governance card, you discard 1 card and play or pay 1 resource of your choice. So that's every time you want to activate a blue governance or play a blue governance. So ouch, your cranes, your innkeepers, all of that stuff is going to cost something extra. Or, that's when you activate them, or if you play them for that matter. And then if you ever draw a blue governance card, then you discard and replace it. So if you were to draw a blue governance card when this was in effect that season, you would have to discard it and then draw another card. So, man, ouch. That's one of the things that really, really almost completely caused me to lose, just that card alone. So watch out. That's something that can happen for this season. Another card you could potentially have is this one, Industrious. This is a one-time thing. It does not affect you the entire season. Play the top 3 cards of the deck into Nightweave's city, even if her city is full. So if her city is full, she gets to play 3 more cards into her city. Ouch. Okay? And of course, that means lots of extra points. But you can foil that plan. You can discard 1 card for each card you wish to prevent Nightweave from drawing and playing into her city. So you could potentially discard 3 cards to completely stop this from happening. But will you have 3 cards to discard? Will you have 3 cards that you want to discard? That's the thing. And that's the thing. So that's something that could potentially happen to you as well. Industrious. And that happened to me. So that was a card that happened to me. And you know, that's the only 2 cards I'm going to talk about, because I just want to explain the difference between a one-time thing and an all-season thing. So that's the plot cards. So another module for the game, another Nightweave variation for the game, something you'll play with probably, most likely. These do not work with other expansions. So if you are playing with other expansions, you're not supposed to play with these, okay? And I'm pretty sure you're not supposed to play with these either. The plans and the plots, you're not supposed to play with if you're playing with other expansions like New Leaf and Pearlbrook and Spirecrest, things like that. So I just thought I'd make note of that. So like I said, it's something you might play with if you're just playing with this expansion, for instance. So just so you know. So that's basically everything you need to know in order to play this expansion. There might be some actions I neglected to mention that you might take, but for the most part, you should have everything you need to know in order to play this expansion, Mistwood. So if you guys liked my how to play video, don't forget to leave me a like, and I'll see you guys again next time. Goodbye.